Sechus Bava Kamma Daf Kuf Yud Ches contains 4 small mishnayos, first 3 pretty close together, discussing how you return lost, borrowed, or stolen objects, and what situation do you have to make the owner aware that it's being returned, and when it counts as being returned and out of the responsibility of the one who is returning it. Let's begin with the first Mishnah. It speaks about 3 types of returning an object which one stole, which one borrowed, or which one was watching as a shomer. In all these situations, it says, if it was given, or if it came in the responsibility of the one who's returning it in the city, in the Yishuv, he can't return it in the midbar out in the wilderness, unless when he took it, and that would be obviously in a case where it was given to him as a loan or as a bikadon, he said, it's on the condition that I can return it to you, or that it be returned to you in the midbar. So the Gemara begins, the Gemara says, first of all, there's a contradiction to this. There's a verse that says that a loan can be returned in any place, a milveh can be returned in any place, a lost object, and a pikadon, that can only be returned in the place in which it was given in the first place. How come over here we don't say that a milveh can be returned anywhere? Here it implies that a milveh can only be returned in the yishuv, but over there it said a milveh can be returned anywhere. So Abai explains, it doesn't mean to say that the milveh, that a loan, the lender has less rights. It means to say that he has more rights. It says the milveh can be returned, meaning that it can be claimed. The lender can claim return of it in any place that he wants. He has the right to choose to claim it in the city, or he has the right to choose to claim it out in the fields. However, if he doesn't want to receive it there, you can't force him to receive it there. That's because he lent it completely on his own. It's a complete chesed what he did. Now, if it's just a lost object or a pikadon, there he doesn't have as many rights. He can't claim it wherever he wants. He can only claim it in the place which it was given in the first place. Okay, Gemara's second point is, what is the chiddush of the end of the Mishnah where it said that if he was given on the condition that it can be returned in the midbar, that it can be returned in that midbar? Obviously, if that was the condition that he made, it's a condition that he made. So Gemara answers, he didn't actually make the condition explicitly. He just said, and here we're going to diverge from Rashi's pshat here, but to go with the other Mefarshim, he just said, when the person who gave it to him said, here, I'm giving it to you because I'm going to the midbar, so please watch it for me, he said, I'm also going to the midbar. Now, his implication was that I could return it to you in the midbar. It didn't say so explicitly. The halacha is teaching you that that's enough of an implication, and therefore he can return it in the midbar. Now we begin the next Mishnah, which discusses 2 situations in which a person says, I don't know if I owe something back to you or not. Does he have to give it or not? Now, the Mishnah does not specify if anyone's claiming it. Gemara will discuss that. Mishnah talks about the first case where he says, I know I either stole, borrowed, or have a pikadon of yours, so I know that I had this at some point, but I don't know if I returned it or if I still owe it back to you. In that situation, he has chayiv to give it to him, to return to him, or to make up for it. If, however, he says, I don't know if I ever got it from you, if I ever stole from you, borrowed from you, or became a shamer for you, then he does not have to give anything, he's pater. Now, it doesn't say if the other person was claiming anything or not. So the Gemara discusses, first, what seems to contradict this. The Gemara says that if Reuven says to Shimon, you owe me 100, you owe me a money, the other one says, I don't know. Shimon says, I don't know. So Reuven says, you owe, Shimon says, I don't know. So it's a machlekes Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda. Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda against Rav Nachman and Rav Yechon. Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda say he's chayiv, since he can't deny the claim, he's chayiv, he has to pay it. Rav Nachman and Rav Yechon say he's pater. Rashi points out he has to swear, but he's pater from having to pay. And what's the reason? Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda say he's chayiv because bari v'shama bari adif, the one who's Reuven says, I know. Shimon says, I don't know. So we go with the one who says he knows. Rav Nachman and Rav Yechanan, however, say since he's a muchzik is stronger even than the bari's claim against the shema, the certain claim against the one who says, I don't know. Now the Gemara says that would seem to be, this discussion would seem to be contradicted by our Mishnah here. Because the Mishnah here says that if the Shimon here in this case says he doesn't know if he borrowed or not in the Seifa, he's pater from having to pay. Now, what was the other person saying? What was the Reuven saying? Was he claiming it or not? If you'll say that he wasn't claiming it, then in the first case, where he's saying that I know that I stole or borrowed from you and I don't know if I returned it, so he has to pay. If the other one's not claiming anything, why should he have to pay? The other one's not claiming anything. He doesn't know if he owes it. What's the reason to pay? Obviously, we're talking about what the other person claims. And he's saying, I agree that I had it at some point. I don't know if I paid it back or not. Okay, so there you have to pay. That makes sense. But in our case, in the Seifa, which is like our case, he's saying, I don't know if I ever had it. He's putter. So you see, then the same case here, where Reuben says, you owe me a money. He says, I don't know anything about it. I don't know. So then he is putter clearly. The Gemara answers no. Really, the entire Mishnah is talking about where no one was claiming anything. And that's why in the Seifa it's pater, and that has nothing to do with our case where he is claiming. You asked me, why does he chayv in the first case? The answer is he's not chayv, but he wants to be yoytza bidei shemayim. He says, look, I don't know if I owe it or not. The other person is not claiming anything. I don't know if I owe anything. I'm coming to be lotzas bidei shemayim. Should I give him or not? And that we say, if you don't know if you ever borrowed it, you're pater, but if you don't know if you returned it, then you are chayiv. The Gemara says we see also that Chibar Abba said him that the pshat here is that he said that Reuven said to Shimon, "You owe me a mana," and he said, "I don't know." He's chayiv. That is by Bala Tzisidei Shemayim, where he wants to be Yaitza Al Pi Midas Shemayim. Okay, now we begin the third Mishnah. And the Mishnah discusses if when somebody returns and does not notify the owner that it's being returned, is he still responsible for it or not? So the Mishnah first establishes that it doesn't count as being returned until the owner knows that it's been returned to his flock so that he can guard it. So it says if somebody steals a lamb from a flock and he returns it to the flock, he puts it back in the flock, but the owner is not aware that he put it in the flock, and then it dies or gets stolen, so the thief is still responsible for it. Even though he put it back in the flock, he didn't transfer responsibility to the owner because the owner doesn't know that it's there. Now, the rest of the Mishnah is a bit hard to read, and the Gemara will have 4 different ways of explaining it. So let's try to be vague enough here. So what it says is that if the original owner, the owner of the flock, never knew that the lamb was ever stolen, and it's returned, and he doesn't know that it was returned, doesn't know anything about it. So it doesn't say what the halacha is. And then it says if he counts it, and he sees how many he has, then the thief is pater. So how do you read this? The Gemara is going to have 4 explanations. The 4 will include what is the halacha, what do you need to no longer have responsibility for returning for the object that you have returned, whether we'll speak about the Reisha, the case where the owner is aware that you had it, the Seifa where he's not aware that you had it, and the last line where it says that he counted, what is that needed for, and what's that referring to in the Mishnah? So Rav says, if the owner knew that you had it, he has to know that you returned it. If he didn't know that you have it, it's enough if you just count it. If you never knew about it, you count it. And he's reading the Mishnah pretty straightforward, and the last line about the counting is going on the Seifa. It's going on the case where you never knew you had it. According to Shmuel, however, it doesn't matter whether the owner knew or didn't know. If he counts and he sees that it's back, then you're pater. You no longer have responsibility for it. And the last line of if he counted it, then you don't have responsibility is going on both cases, the Reisha and the Seifa, whether the owner knew that it was ever taken or not. Now, Rav Yechanan says differently. Rav Yechanan says that if the owner knew about it, minyan is enough to pater it. That's the case where if he counts, it's enough and you're pater from it. If he never knew about it, you don't have to do anything. If he never knew about it, he always kept responsibility for it, and you don't need to notify him. He doesn't have to count. You're all good. And therefore, the halacha of minyan that he counted is only referring to the Reisha, because in the Sefer you don't need anything. And Rav Chizda says, and he flipped pshat to what everyone else says, similar to Rav Yechanan and to Shmuel, he says that if the owner knew and then he counted, that's enough. Your responsibility is off. However, he says if the owner never knew about it, it's not enough for you to return it, and it's not enough for him to count. You have to go tell him that it was gone. And the reason is because, and Rav explains, the reason that Rav Chizda says this is because now that the animal has been out for a while, he's learned to escape, and he's harder to watch. You have to notify the owner so that he should be aware that this animal requires extra shmir, and if you haven't, it's still your responsibility. Gemara now questions Rava and Rav that we seem to see these halachas other, not the way it's said here. So Rava had explained Rav Chizda, the Gemara assumes that he holds like Rav Chizda, which is that when the owner knew that it was missing, he has to at least count it to take responsibility for it. The question is that we see that Rava says otherwise. Rava has a case where somebody lifts up an animal to steal it, and the owner sees him and he yells at him, and he drops it or throws it back to where it was, but the owner's not aware that he returned it. So the halacha is there that if it gets killed or it dies or it gets stolen from the flock, the thief is still responsible for it, which implies that it hasn't been returned. Now, why not? We should be referring to a case where he counted it as well. And Rava said, in a case where he knew that it was stolen and he counts it, that's enough. It should now be the owner's responsibility. So why is it not the owner's responsibility if he counted it? So my answer is no, it's referring to a case where he didn't count it. He just dropped it and the owner is not aware that it was returned, and therefore it's the responsibility of the thief. Now, the Gemara asks on Rav. Rav had said that if the owner knows, then you have to notify him it's being returned. If he doesn't know, then he has to at least count it. But you need at least one or the other, either counting or notification in all situations. The Gemara asks this halach where Rav says that if the owner had a flock in the midbar and the thief or whoever it was who had it put the sheep in the flock, so that's returned. That's enough. But he didn't inform him and he didn't count it. So according to Rav, that shouldn't be enough. So my answer is Rav Chanan. But Rav says it's talking about a case where it was a spotted sheep, so it's a very distinct look, and therefore you don't need to notify because everybody's going to notice that it's been returned. Now we have a four-way machlekes here. There's really only two main machlekes, and so the first one is where the owner is aware that it's been taken. Do you have to notify him, or is a minyan enough? Rav says you have to notify him. Shmuel, Riyachna, and Rav Chisda all say minyan is enough. In the case where the owner is not aware that it's ever been taken, so Rav and Shmuel say minyan is enough. Rav Yochanan says you don't need anything, and Rav Chisda says you need to notify him. And that's only by animals where the animal could wander away. So the Gemara says we have a brisa which seems to show that these are actually machlokes tanaim. So the brisa discusses two cases: somebody who steals a sheep from a herd and somebody who takes a coin from a wallet. And what do you have to do to return it? So Rabbi Shmuel says just put it back where it was. Rabbi Kiva says you have to notify him. So again, Rabbi Shmuel is saying you don't need to notify. Rabbi Kiva is saying you do need to notify. And the question is, which case are they arguing about? So the Gemara first wants to say they're arguing in the case of the stolen coin. And they both hold of a rule which Rabbi Yitzchak said that a person is always aware what he has in his wallet. People check their wallets all the time. He's aware that it's missing. Soon after it's taken, he finds out that it's missing, and soon after it's returned, he counts and finds out that it's returned. So it's a case of him being aware, and it's a case of minyan. So Rabbi Shmuel, who says you just have to put it back where it was, you don't have to notify him, is holding like Shmuel, who says that even in a case where he's aware that it's missing, it's enough for him to come to count on his own and see that it's been returned. Rabbi Akiva, who says that you have to inform him, holds that in a case where he's aware that it's missing, you have to make him aware that it has been returned. And that's what the machlokes should be over. Says Gemara, no, perhaps not. Perhaps the machlokes is in the case of the sheep. And it's talking about where it was taken without the bailam being aware of it. And the question is, do you have to notify him when it's being returned? And the machlokes is that of Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Chisda. According to Rabbi Yishmael, you don't need to notify him because he's holding like Rabbi Yochanan. According to Rabbi Chisda, you do need, and according to Rabbi Akiva, that is, you do need to notify him. That's like Rabbi Chisda. And if you took something without him being aware, especially particularly an animal, where it could wander away now on its own, and it's more likely to do so, he must be notified. Says Gemara, there's actually a third pshat here, and that's Rav Zvid. Rav Zvid says this machlekes has nothing to do with our machlekes. Everyone agrees to Rav Chisda that you would need to notify him if you were returning it to the original owner who you stole it from. The case here is that the shomer stole it himself. The shomer claimed that it was lost and he himself was hiding it somewhere, and so now he's a thief, but he stole it from his own shmir, from his own being in charge of it. Now the question is, can he put it back? Can he return it by putting him back to being a shomer on it? Or do you say his shmir status has been revoked? He's no longer a shomer. Once you try to steal it, the bailam don't trust him anymore, so he's not a shomer anymore. So Rabbi Yishmael says you could put it back to where it was. They hold that he's still a shomer, he still trusts him, and he can put it back in his own shmir, and then it's considered returned. Rabbi Akiva says, no, you have to inform the owner. That means the owner no longer relies on you as a shomer, and it's not considered returned until you go give it to the owner. You can't go back to being a shomer on it. Now, the Gemara wants to link another machlekes tanaim to this, and this is about the concept of minyan, where if the owner counts it, that's considered, and he sees how much he has, that's considered to be as if he's notified, and it's considered returned. Someone wants to say that there's another machlekes tanaim over whether that works or not. The machlekes is a brisa: if somebody steals from someone else, now he owes him the money, and he's embarrassed, he wants to return it, but he's embarrassed to return it to him and to notify him to return it. So instead, he buys something from him, and he pays extra, and the extra amount is equal to the amount that he owes him. So in this way, he sneaks the money back to him without him being aware of it. The question is he yaitza returning it or not? So it's a machlekes. One Tana says he's yaitza, one Tana says he's not yaitza. What is the machlekes about? So the Gemara first wants to say everybody agrees to Rabbi Yitzchak and holds that the person who's receiving the money is aware of how much he got, and it's considered as if there was an immediate count right away. He counts the money. What's the machlekes over? This minion, is that considered to be returned or not? The machlekes over that concept. So Gemara says no, maybe not. Maybe that they're actually arguing over Rabbi Yitzchak. They're arguing over that if he would be aware, everyone would agree that the fact that he's aware of how much money is there is considered returned. But the question is he going to count it? Is he considered to be aware or not? Another option I could tell you is that everybody agrees to Rabbi Yitzchak that he counts. The question over here, the difference between the two, Tanaim, is where did he put the money? If he put it in his hand, then he just throws it in his box without counting it. If he put it in his wallet, then he always counts the wallet. Rabbi Yitzchak said people count their wallet all the time. A third way of explaining this is that we're all talking where he puts it in the wallet, but the one Tana is talking about where he has other money in that wallet. Now, once it's already thrown into the wallet, he can no longer count it and see how much was given to him. And he'll never notice how much money he has there because he had other money there. The other Tana that says it is considered returned is referring to where he didn't have anything else there, so as soon as he counts it, he's aware that he received that extra money. Now we get our next and final mission for the daf. The mission discusses certain merchandise which you may want to buy from someone, which you may need to be concerned that it's been stolen. So the first is if you want to buy products of sheep from a shepherd, the shepherd likely may have stolen it, and if he wants to sell it now from the sheep that he's supposed to be watching, so you cannot buy wool or milk or the baby sheep or goats from a shepherd. You also shouldn't buy fruit or wood from somebody who's watching fruit trees, because here they're both watching them for someone else. They probably don't have their own. If they're selling it, they probably stole it. Now, women are shomrim on the possessions of their husbands. Mashakana ishakana baila. However, you can buy wool clothing in Yehuda from women there, and Pishtim clothing in the Galil from women there, because that is their work. They make these things, and their husbands understand that they're making them to be sold, and that's part of the understanding, and therefore they do have the right to sell it. Now you can buy calves in the Sharon. The Sharon is a flat open area where the calves go for cheap, and therefore the shepherds have their own calves, and therefore it's likely that what they're selling is their own, and it's not a problem. Now, if the seller tells you to hide something, it's also to buy it, and you're allowed to buy eggs and chickens from anyone. You don't need to be concerned that it got stolen. We now begin the Gemara, which introduces a brisa that shows certain things and circumstances in which you can buy from the shepherd, and that's something which is either his, which the owners don't want, can't access, or would be aware if they were missing, and therefore they couldn't be that he's selling something that's not his. So the brisa says you're not allowed to buy goats, you can't buy kids, you can't buy shearings of wool, and you can't buy pluckings of wool that is pulled off, that would be caught somewhere and pulled off. All these things belong to the owner of the animals, and they would be stolen. However, you are allowed to buy sewn clothing. That's because even if they would be stolen, if he made them into thread and wove them into clothing, then it's already a lot of shinois, and it belongs to him. It would be stolen, but it belongs to him, and therefore he's allowed to sell it to you. He still owes the money back, but he's allowed to sell it to you. Now, other things which you could buy are milk and cheese out in the midbar, not in the city area, because then the owner wants them, but out in the midbar is not going to go to get them, so any milk and cheese that were made out there belong to the shepherd. You're also allowed to buy 4 or 5 sheep, or 4 or 5 rolls of wool, and again the reason is because he can't explain why that's lost. He can't say it was eaten by a wolf, and therefore if he's just stealing that and it's not his property to sell, he's going to get caught. So it must be, if he's putting them up for sale, then it's actually his. However, you should not buy 2 sheep or 2 rows of wool, because then he could be stealing and he'll claim it got eaten by a wolf. Rabbi Yehuda says you are allowed to buy from him domesticated sheep, but not wild sheep, because domesticated sheep the owner will see if any of them are missing, but wild sheep he will not. And the brisa ends with the rule: anything which the owner will see if the shepherd sells it and they didn't have permission to, you're allowed to buy. Anything which he won't notice, then you're not allowed to buy. Now again, the Gemara has questions on the brisa about the line of you're allowed to buy 4 or 5, but you're not allowed to buy 2. So 2 main issues over here. First of all, which is it, 4 or 5? If you're allowed to buy 4, Bava Kamma you're allowed to buy 5, so that's even more. The owner will for sure notice that they are missing. Gemara answers, Rav Chisda says it's referring to 4 out of 5. The brisa is telling you you're allowed to buy 4 if the entire flock is only 5. Then that means that 80% of a flock will be missing, that the owner is going to notice. Less than that, you cannot. The second version of what Rav Chisda said is that if it's a large flock, then you can only by 5 because you need a more significant percentage to be missing for the owner to notice. If it's a smaller flock, then the owner will. Then 4 is enough because that is a significant enough percentage of a small flock. Then our second question is, you tell me that I could buy 4 and I can't buy 2. What about 3? Contradictory implications about whether I could buy 3 or not. So the Gemara says sometimes you could buy 3, sometimes you can't. Depends if it's a flock of healthy sheep or if it's weak sheep. If it's weak sheep, the owner is not paying attention to it, he won't notice. Therefore, you shouldn't buy 3. If it is healthy, then he's paying attention to it, he'll notice 3, and therefore even 3 you're allowed to buy. Now, the Gemara has a question, what did Rabbi Yehuda mean when he said that it depends if they are domesticated or wild? Is he referring to the 4 or 5 you are allowed to buy? And he's saying l'chumra, that's only if it's domesticated, but wild, even 4 or 5 you can't buy. Or is he referring to the 2 that you're not allowed to buy, and he's saying l'kuli, you're only not allowed to buy them if they're wild, and the owner's not going to notice, but domesticated he'll notice even the 2. So Gemara brings a brisa which clearly shows, the brisa says, Rabbi Yehuda says you're allowed to buy domesticated, you're not allowed to buy wild ones. However, wherever you are, you're allowed to buy 4 or 5. So clearly his split between the wild and domesticated is going on the case of the 2, not the case of the 4 and 5.